Hello, welcome to the final session of the Willow and Tissue course. Today we're going to be making animals. Here are some of the examples from past students. And here are examples that I found on the internet. You can find lots of examples of willow and tissue animals on the internet. And these are the two examples that I will be making during this session, a fish and a monkey. The techniques that we'll be using build on what we've covered in the previous courses, in particular the bending techniques, the curving techniques from session 3. So it's really important that you've done those sessions first so that you are able to manage this well. Before you start making a willow and tissue animal, you need to do a little bit of planning. That can be through your own drawing. So for example, for the fish, I know I need a sort of tube shape like this, and then a loop at the front to make the bottom of the mouth, a loop for the eyes, these sort of loops for the fins, this shape in the back for the tail, and I'm sort of thinking about where I'm putting in straight pieces on the fins and in the veins on the fins. You can also use the internet to help you. So I searched for how to draw animals step by step and found these really helpful because they really help you think and plot through the basic shapes, which will then build into something more complicated. So let's get started, and the first thing we're going to start with is the fish. So last session I made this shape that you'll remember from rings and straight pieces pieced in at the end. I want to add a mouth in, so I've got a ring that was made earlier and I've actually squeezed it at one end, and that's going to slot in there to make a mouth. That makes sense? Looking at my diagram, I need fins and tail that are curved. So in order to do that, put that to one side a second, I've used my jig that I made previously. Using wet willow, I've bent the shapes around and held them in place until they've dried. So here I have a couple of fins, and here I have an alternative to a jig is to bend the shape you want and then secure until it's dried with wire or with masking tape. These are some of the pieces for my monkey. Something else you can do if you just want curves is you can create rings like this, and then when they're dry, cut them. So I've taped my mouth in. You can see at the moment it moves. I just want to put a piece in to stop that, so I'm going to tape in a piece to there so that the mouth is just slightly open. Okay, and that's just a straight dry piece. I can use those for infilling. Now I'm attaching the tail. Now ideally I'd be attaching it at where there's a length running all the way down, but that doesn't fit in with where the mouth is at the front. So I'm having to attach it halfway around a ring. So in order to make that work, I'm going to put in another piece there and another piece here. And then I'm going to put veins across from those pieces into the tail. There's the tail added on, and it is as straightforward as that. The basic shape, and then you can use thinner bits if you like for infilling. They're not structural, they're just there to give it the pattern of the veins. Now when it comes to the side fin, this one here, I'm actually going to insert it at a cross like that, because that will just help give it a little bit more rigidity. So I'm going to wrap the tape around there, and then I'll add the vanes in. I'm going to just carry on and add on all the fins in the same way. Okay, see you in a bit. I've added the side fins on. Let me show you by putting a piece of paper behind it. So using whippy ends for vanes. And now I want to do this fin at the bottom, dorsal fin, I think. In order to do that, I need to bend some willow to get this sort of shape. So I'm going to start with some soaked willow, squeeze a section so that I can create a bend. I'm just going to turn that around and show you that's going to run along the side there. So then I need to create another bend for this bit here. So squeeze it, bend it. And now I need to get a curve in that bit. So I could be folding it around something, but I'm just going to gently work it with my fingers to try to get a bit of a curve in that bit. Just be gentle with it. So that's about the sort of curve, and then at that point I need to squeeze again, bend, and bend once more where it comes back to the body. So just cutting that piece off. When I stick it on, hopefully you'll be able to see how this all works. So some tape on there. Wrapping that around the bottom line of the body. Plenty of tape because it's wet. And then coming around like that. I have to just encourage that bend a little bit more later on. Let's just see. Tape on the other end. Oops. Right, so put some tape around. Tape it onto the body. Yeah, I might just need a little bit of extra encouragement whilst it's drying just to get that in shape. So what I'm going to do whilst it's drying is put a little bit of tape here to pull the middle in. So just using that tape whilst it's drying to squeeze that middle in so I get the curve. Okay, that's a little bit loose. I'm just going to finish taping that on a little bit more securely. When it's dry, I'll add in the fins. The fin at the front here, again, is a curved fin. You see that there. I don't need to necessarily curve it beforehand. What I'm going to do is take some soaked willow and just gently work it with my fingers, or I can work it around a tube like before and make that fin. Okay, and I do believe it's too close together, so I'll make a couple of those and tape them on. I've actually used Oasis binding wire to create the vanes on this fin because it's much thinner, and these ones, because they're really very small, I think I'll draw the vanes on later. This has so far been based on this drawing which was taken for a picture of the fish on the internet, but I want to add something a little bit quirkier at the top. I don't know if you remember this from the last session, but I think I'm going to attach that to the top to create a bit more of an interesting top fin. So I'm just going to take that in place and maybe add a few more veins with the Oasis body wire, and then I am all ready to apply tissue. Now I've built my frame, I'm ready to apply tissue. It's worth just saying that I could have added extra pieces in here. They would have added to the design, and they would also have added to the roundness of the shape. But just for time's sake, I'm going to carry on from this stage. So I've got my wet work tissue. I've cut it into as large a piece as I can. I think I can fold around without it causing big wrinkles. So I can do that section, but I can't do any more than that. So try and do that sort of size. I've got a pot of PVA glue. I've got another pot with diluted PVA glue in it and a brush for each. So just as before, the neat glue goes on the frame. And then the water down glue goes through the tissue, and then I apply it. Now I just had an accident and tore my piece of tissue, so I've had to apply it on in two pieces which are overlapping at this point. And it's worth just mentioning that normally I would try to make sure the overlap was on a seam, always on the seam, so it's as hidden as possible. But with this particular one, what I intend to do once it's covered in the wet work tissue and dried is apply coloured tissue over the top. So this layer, it doesn't matter so much if the overlaps show, they'll be hidden by the coloured tissue. So I'm going to work my way down, and I'm going to put the wet work tissue underneath the fins first, the fins on the side, before I apply them to the fins themselves. All right, okay, cracking with that, and I will see you in a bit once it's done. So the tissue is on one side, and I've dried it off, and you notice I've left quite a lot of it sort of hanging rather than fold them up and over too much, because that can create a lot of bunching. Particularly on the fins, I want them to be nice and elegant. So I've let the tissue just hang off, and now that it's dry, I can take a sharp knife and just carefully trim that back. So I'm just carefully taking this bit off to make that neater. Might take me a couple of goes to just finish it off. So that's coming on, that's looking much neater now as I trim it. This is also an opportunity to look for any bits which are lifting up or anything that you've missed, and just repair them. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go and do the other side. There's the fish covered in the wet work tissue, and now I'm going to apply skins of coloured tissue over the top. Now if you decide to do this, I would suggest that you have a look at some pictures of fish, and particularly tropical fish, and look for interesting colours that you could use. The most important thing to remember about the colours though is that tissue paper is translucent, so one colour will show through another. So don't put lots of dark colour on and expect you can cover it with something light. Right, I'm going to get started. So my fish is going to be kind of speckled orange and yellow with some black stripes down it. And I found these, which I thought I would add as eyes. You could make a little ring if you wanted to out of willow and stick that on the outside and then put a little bit of tissue over it. Or you might be able to find half of a foam ball or something like that. Anyway, to stick this on, I'm using very slightly diluted glue. Spread it all over the surface. put the tissue on without wetting it and brush it down, and then add another piece over the top. And I'm just going to let those overlap a little bit so the colours mix. I've put the orange and yellow on the fish, and now I'm going to start to add some black, starting with the black patch behind the eye, and then tearing strips to create black stripes through the fish. There's my finished fish with its black stripes. I've tied some of the binding wire to the top so I can hang it. I just thought I would show you all the way around. I put those black bands all the way around to finish off the design. And here is the fish lit up. Now I'm going to move on to making a monkey. I've got two resources. One is a few different images of monkeys swinging from trees, trying to just look for the most interesting sort of design. And the other one is a very simple how-to step-by-step drawing of a monkey. And this sort of thing is really helpful. So for example, I can see I need some sort of ovoid shape for the body, and that's what I've made here with a little bit of a bend in it just there for the back. So it's basically a sphere, but the ring in the middle is a lot smaller, so it's all squashed in. Similarly, got a sphere for the head. I've started to add a few features on, a couple of loops for ears, a couple of loops for eyes, and I'll be adding a mouth into that. For the arm, I actually want like this straight arm on this picture, so I've prepared some pieces of willow, went soaked so nice and wet, bent that hook for the hand here and taped that, and that nice straight there's 4 pieces. I'll join those together to make the arm and hand. The tail, I quite like the idea of quite a long wiggly tail. So again, I've taken 4 pieces of willow, bent them into shape and held them together with tape whilst they dried. So really useful to have something like this to help you just break it down into simpler bits, but also a few other pictures for inspiration. Right, on to making the head. It's a little bit harder to see these at this stage because of the layers, but I've taken a simple sphere and I've put in some more rings, and here I've added a couple of circles for some eyes and a brow. Here I've just bent some pieces of willow and taped them on to make ears, and now I want to build out the mouth. So what I'm going to do is I've got these pieces and I'm going to insert them in there so that it sticks out. Just try and show you that the angle sticks out much more. So I'm going to tape those in there, and I think I'm actually going to need 3 of those, so I'll bend another piece of willow to help fit that in. I'll just get those taped in. Now I've put a little bit of paper towel on the inside, so hopefully you can see this a little bit better, but I've got my 3 rings joined on to make those lips, and I've added a couple of cross pieces here just to make the brow of the nose. And now what I'm going to do is add some curves from the bottom lip just to sort of finish that bit off. So a little bit of willow that's got a bit of curving in it, and I'm going to tape those from there coming around the base. Now normally you wouldn't apply tissue until assembled the whole thing, but just so you can get some idea of how it's taking shape, I thought I'd put on some tissue on the front of the face. So the eyes are working well and the nose. I do wonder if the lips are quite right, and if I ought to put in another curve in there though. I think that might be useful to make the lips just stand out that little bit more. So I think I will do that. It's not difficult. I'm going to insert it through there, make a hole and put some tape through or wire it, and then put more tissue over it. Once I've done that, I will move on to the body, and here's my body. It's very, very basic, so I need to add in quite a few more rings into there in order to give the body more volume. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the head and the body, putting extra pieces in, and then join them together. And show you once I've got to that stage, then I'll move on to the arms and the tail. I've joined the head to the body. Notice that I put the extra piece in for the mouth, and I have to say it was really quite difficult to get it to join because the tissue was in the way, so I wouldn't recommend putting a tissue on too early. And now I've been building up the contours of the body, and I just want to remind you of the second session when we looked at lanterns and about infilling. It don't have to be strong bits, but the pattern matters. So I've created a sort of circle for the stomach and rings for the chest, and on the back even a couple of little rings for its bum. Now I need to move on to making the arms and legs and then joining them together. I'm going to make a leg like this, which is basically a bent tube and some curves joined together with a little bit of a triangle to make a heel. To start with then, for the leg, I need 4 pieces bent to about the same sort of angle. They've been left to dry, and as I unwrap those, if I can manage to, they will all hold in shape. Yeah, and I need 3 rings. These aren't perfect, but they'll do. A large, a medium and a small, so that's for the thigh, the knee and then the ankle. For the foot, I need a series of curves that are all the same, so I've made some circles, and then I'm just going to cut pieces out for the curved part of the foot, and I will need some straight pieces too. Right. So I've joined the 4 pieces roughly in the middle with the medium-sized ring, and now I'm going to join in the large ring at one end and the small ring at the other. As I do, I will just be adjusting and twisting things so that it all fits together. There's my other leg so far. It's a little bit loose and bendy at the moment. We can strengthen it later. But now I'm going to move on to making the foot. So I need 4 curved pieces the same size. I've actually marked this, and from the circle I'm going to cut pieces. Hold it up against there. So, oops, tear tape off. I've got 4 pieces the same length, like so. Now what I'm going to do is join them with straight pieces at both ends. So two like that, and the others in between. I join those 4 curves together like that to form the curve of the foot, and now I just need 5 more pieces, a piece like that, and another piece like that, joining it on both sides, and then a cross piece connecting that. So I'm going to tape those on now. So there's my foot with a bit of a heel on it. Here's my leg, and I just need to slot that in there and tape it in place, and then trim a little bit, trim off the excess. So the legs can now be inserted and wired in at whatever angle I fancy onto the body frame. That's what I'm going to do next, and then I'll move on to making the arms. So a monkey now has two legs slightly offset so it's not too symmetrical. I'm going to have one arm hanging down, which will be made in much the same way as the legs, a little bit longer. But for the one that's going upwards, I've made, to make it stronger, I've made the hand at the same time as a kind of hook. So now I've got to work out, join those bits together into a cylinder and then splay those fingers out so that they work. Take those together to create a long arm, and although those three curves just about managed to look like there could be a hand, this extra one underneath, that doesn't really work, it's in the wrong dimension. So I'm going to chop that off and then just try to turn this bit into a bit more of a hand by putting some cross pieces on. So that's the hand finished, and now I'm going to fix it into the body like so, so the monkey will be hanging from this arm. So the other arm modelled very much along the lines of the legs, the bend in it, and adding on a foot, but this time instead of the heel going all the way across, it just stayed in that one area as a thumb. That needs attaching, and the final thing to make is the tail. Here are the pieces for my tail, and because I want the tail to be really quite thin at one end, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tape them together and just splay them out a little bit with rings towards the end. So let me just put that together. I've joined two of the pieces together with a small ring, an even smaller one, and then tapering and becoming one further down. And now I'm going to add the other pieces in, just carefully trying to get them to fit into place. That proved a little bit trickier than I expected. I had to put an extra ring in and reinforce a bit, and I had to trim one of them because I couldn't quite make the curves meet. But that's how it is. You just have to improvise a little bit. I'm going to join that on, and then I'm going to give you a shot of the monkey so far before I add some wetwork tissue. So here's the monkey so far. You can see the arm that it's going to hang from, the two legs sticking out the arm, and then round the back you've got the tail coming out. Right, onto the tissue. So here's the monkey all finished. And here it is with a light behind it, so you really do see the shapes of the willow on the inside. Now, have fun with this course. You don't have to do a fish, you don't have to do a monkey, you can do any animal you like. Just remember, if you start from the simple things like cylinders and curves, it's very, very easy to build up something that's more complicated. Take your time, have fun. And I look forward to seeing what you've done. Please share it on Facebook if you do Facebook. Thanks, bye-bye.